Hey guys, welcome to the Joyful Whisk Kitchen, aka my apartment. I'm Taylor and I am back with another video in my cake decorating basics series. And today I'm going to be showing you how to assemble a layer cake and apply a crumb coat. If you don't know what a crumb coat is, it's actually a really important step in the cake decorating process. And basically all it is after we layer and stack our cake, we're going to apply a thin layer of frosting to our cake to trap in any crumbs so they're not visible when we go to decorate our cake, and it's also going to provide us with a smooth foundation for the rest of our decorating. This also doubles as a very popular cake trend right now, which is a semi-naked cake. So if you get to the point of your crumb coat, you can call it good, throw on a cake topper or some floral, and you have a trendy rustic cake. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start out by putting our cake board onto our turntable, and you want to make sure that you're using a cake board that is 1 to 2 inches larger than the cake you're decorating. So today I'm going to be decorating a 6-inch cake, so I'm using an 8-inch cake board. And then we're just going to take our large offset spatula and just take a little tiny bit of frosting and spread it just a tiny little circle in the middle of our cake board so that it's going to stick the cake on there. So now we're going to grab our prepared cake layers. So when I say prepared cake layers, I have baked these cakes and then leveled them because we want to start with really level cakes. So I used just a Wilton cake leveler. You can definitely use a knife as well, but that's really honestly easy to mess up and not get perfectly level, so I like using a cake leveler. So I leveled the cakes, wrapped them in saran wrap, and then stuck them in the freezer to freeze overnight. If you get freaked out by hearing the word freezer, it's totally fine. They don't get dry, it doesn't affect the flavor, nothing like that. Basically, what freezing them helps us do is it's going to help the cake from getting crummy. It kind of helps keep the crumbs contained, and then it's just, I don't know how else to describe it other than it's just easier to work with the cake when you're using a chilled cake. And then once it comes to room temperature, after you've decorated it and everything, it's still moist and delicious and great. So now that we have our first layer of cake on there, again, we applied that frosting so it's kind of stuck on there. Our cake is in the middle of the board and we're starting with a very level base. So next we are going to grab some frosting and throw it on there. I kind of just eyeball it. I've gotten used to how much frosting I like to use, but you do just want to make sure that you're using the same amount of frosting in between each layer. So if you need to measure it out, you can definitely do that. And then we're just going to spread it around our cake, just making sure it is nice and even. And if a little bit of frosting goes off the edges, that's totally fine. Just kind of spin it around, making sure it's nice and even. Okay, we have our next cake layer and we're just going to place that directly on top, and we have the top of the cake up, and then you just want to make sure that all the sides are lined up so it is nice and even on the sides. And then just going to do the same thing with the frosting, and I'm just using a vanilla buttercream frosting. This is the frosting that I always use to decorate the outside of my cakes regardless of whatever the inside filling is, and I will put a link in the description below for the video I made with the recipe on how to make this frosting. Okay, and then our last cake layer, we're going to place upside down, and this is just gonna help us get those nice crisp edges on the top of our cake. And again, just making sure it's lined up nicely and looking even. Okay, next we are going to grab our large offset spatula again, and all this frosting that's kind of like hanging over the edges, we are just going to smooth out with our knife. And again, no worries if you're getting any crumbs trapped in that frosting, because again, that's the whole point of the crumb coat. So now that I've kind of smoothed those out, we're gonna start adding some more frosting onto the cake and basically just applying a thin layer. So you don't wanna do it too thick. You wanna kind of drag your knife so it's really smoothing it out, and you should be able to see parts of the cake through your frosting, so it won't all be completely white. And what I like to do is when I'm grabbing my frosting from my bowl, because I'm getting crumbs on this knife, is take a spatula and just put it on the knife so that I'm not sticking the knife with crumbs into my bowl of frosting. Okay, now that the sides are all coated, it's definitely rough and not smooth, but we're gonna move on to the top really quick. And the top, we're just going to throw a little dollop of frosting on there and spread it nice and thin. And again, okay if the frosting goes over the edges. And we are definitely getting a few crumbs trapped in there, but not too many since we're starting with the chilled cake. Okay, so now that our cake has a thin layer of frosting all around it, again, it's definitely really rough right now, we just kind of slapped it on there. We're going to take our bench scraper and you're going to hold it at about a 45-degree angle and just start turning your turntable to scrape off all that excess frosting. So once I've gone around once, you can see I've got some frosting on there, and I'm just gonna scrape it off my bench scraper and do it another time. Scrape it off my bench scraper again. And if there's any air bubbles or imperfections or whatever, we don't care at this point because it's going to be covered up by another layer of frosting anyway. So now that my sides are nice and smooth, I'm gonna fix the top of the cake because it has a little ring of extra frosting there. So basically you're just going to take your bench scraper and lightly scrape the frosting from the edge of the cake, kind of in and up, and it just takes off a tiny little bit. And make sure you scrape off your bench scraper between each swipe because otherwise it'll start messing up your edges. Okay, now I have some spots where the frosting is still hanging over the edge a little bit, so I'm just gonna do one more around and one more time pull in that extra frosting. All right, and that's all there is to it. Our crumb coat is complete. If we were using this as a semi-naked cake, I might take my bench scraper and just kind of scrape down a little bit more because I like the look of a little bit more less frosting on those. But if I'm going to be continuing to decorate this cake, I can just call it good here. And before I go on to do whatever decoration I'm gonna do or apply the outer layer of frosting, I want to chill the cake. So I would either pop this in the freezer for 5 minutes. You don't want it in there longer because then it's going to get too cold and too difficult to put your next layer of frosting on, or you can pop it in the refrigerator for 15 or more minutes. That one, it doesn't really matter if you leave it in there longer, so if you need to leave it in there, go do something else, come back to it, it's totally fine in there until you're ready for the next step. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more cake decorating tips and tutorials. If you try this out and make your own semi-naked cake, I would love to see your creation. Tag me on Instagram at @thejoyfulwhisk, and you can also follow me on there to keep up with all of my creations. I post on there daily.